In the last few seconds before sleep arrives, a short phrase is repeated in silence, always at the same moment of the night, always in the same way, for 7 nights in a row. It is exactly in that instant and no other moment of the day that the phrase that changes everything in your life lives in just 7 days, as long as you say it every night in the precise second when the mind no longer has the strength to argue with you. This pattern wasn't born from theory. It was born from repeated observation across centuries in regions that never had contact with one another, separated by different languages, different climates, different gods. Entire communities, without exchanging a single word between them, arrived at the same conclusion through completely independent paths. The night holds a door that the day simply does not have. No one needed a book, a course, or scientific terminology to notice this. All it took was to repeat, observe what changed in the following week, and repeat again, generation after generation, until it became a custom so deeply rooted that no one questioned why it worked in that specific way. What catches the attention of those who dedicate themselves to studying these traditions is the precision of the number. Traditions that never crossed paths, coming from opposite ends of the map, fixed exactly the same interval. 7 nights, never 6, never 8, never 10. Those who tried to shorten the process, doing 3 or 4 repetitions and stopping out of impatience, reported 0 results. Those who stretched it too far lost the precision of the practice and diluted the effect in a sea of mechanical repetitions, without any real presence. This is not a coincidence of decorative detail preserved by superstition. It is the kind of repetition that only appears when a real mechanism is working behind it, in the same way anywhere on the planet, regardless of language or the prior beliefs of those who practice it. And that mechanism never depended on blind faith. It doesn't require believing in anything beyond the habit itself, sustained for 7 consecutive days without skipping a single night. There is no complicated ritual, no sacred object, no incense, no words in a dead language. There is only the right moment, the right phrase, and that phrase is shorter than anyone imagines before learning the structure behind it. There is the discipline to keep the sequence intact from the first to the last day. It is a mechanism simple enough for anyone to repeat alone, in the dark, without anyone knowing, and specific enough to never work outside the time frame it was designed to work in. The problem is that, at some point in recent history, this knowledge was intercepted by those who saw in it a commercial opportunity. It became a quick formula for prosperity, a positive mindset course, an instant therapy sold in installments. The essence was preserved in the name, affirmation, law of attraction, abundance mindset, but the detail that actually sustained the method was exactly the first thing to be cut in the process of simplification. No one mentions the exact timing anymore. No one talks about the door that only opens in a specific window of the night, seconds before the body shuts down completely, and it is precisely in that gap, left behind by the hollowed-out versions sold en masse, that most attempts, even those made with total sincerity, even those repeated every single day, never came close to producing any result at all. It is not lack of faith. It is not lack of effort. It is not deserving it, as so many people repeat to console themselves after trying and seeing nothing happen. The reason is simpler and more frustrating than any spiritual explanation. It is the wrong time. Most people who have ever tried this practice did exactly what the courses taught them. They repeated a phrase in the morning, in the mirror, in the car, in the coffee line, with that forced energy of someone trying to convince themselves of something they don't yet feel is truth. And the problem is not in the intention, it is in the environment where that intention is placed. During the day, the mind is in a constant state of alert, processing threats, comparing, judging, calculating what could go wrong. This defense mechanism, which has existed for millennia to keep every human being alive in the face of real danger, does not shut down simply because someone decided to say a pretty phrase while looking in the mirror. On the contrary, it works even harder when it detects an affirmation that sounds too good to be true. Every word spoken in that state passes through an automatic filter of skepticism, and that filter systematically rejects anything that seems to contradict the reality the person is living at that moment. That is why saying in the middle of traffic that some goal already belongs to you, while the bank account is in the red and a bill is due tomorrow, simply does not land. The phrase knocks on the wrong door, at the wrong time, with the wrong gatekeeper on duty. The mind hears it, registers it as a wish, perhaps even as hope, but does not register it as an instruction. And there is an enormous difference between wishing for something and instructing something. The first stays only on the surface. The second changes behavior, choice, and perception without the person even realizing they are changing. Those who keep trying in the morning with no results usually arrive at one of two conclusions. Either the phrase doesn't work, or something is wrong with them. Neither conclusion is true. What is wrong in the vast majority of cases is simply the moment chosen to carry out the practice. It is like trying to plant a seed in dry soil in the middle of the day, under a strong sun, and concluding that the seed is defective, when in reality, what is missing is the right soil, at the right time, under the right conditions for it to germinate. There is another detail that few people notice. Repetition done during the day tends to become a mechanical habit very quickly. The person repeats without feeling, without presence, like someone reciting a memorized prayer without paying attention to the words. And a phrase repeated without real presence loses its power, becomes mere sound, becomes background noise that the mind itself learns to ignore after a few days. This is the exact opposite of what should happen. Instead of the repetition gaining strength with each night, it gradually weakens until it disappears entirely into the routine, leaving no trace of real change in the life of whoever practiced it. And it is interesting to note that this timing error is not recent. It appears exactly at the point where the original practice was translated, simplified, and packaged for mass sale. Someone, at some point in recent history, decided that the timing didn't matter all that much, that what mattered was the intention, and cut out precisely the part that regulated the entire mechanism behind the phrase. What remained was the concept, without the engine that made the concept actually work. Before it became the law of attraction, before it received any catchy name for a book cover or video thumbnail, this nightly repetition circulated in a completely different way. By word of mouth, within closed communities, with no written record, no course, no promise of quick results. It was passed from teacher to student, always with the same central instruction preserved intact, the exact hour at which the phrase was to be spoken, and no other. Those who received this knowledge understood, without needing scientific explanation, that they were dealing with something too serious to be treated with haste or carelessness. What these communities preserved, each in their own way, was the understanding that declaring ownership over something, saying that it already belongs to you, in the present tense, without conditions, without deadlines, without a request, produces a completely different effect depending on the mental state in which that declaration is made. Made in the wrong state, it is just words. Made in the right state, it is an instruction. And the right state was never the morning, never the middle of the day, never any moment of alertness and movement. It was always the same. The instant when the body had already gone still, the mind was already yielding, and the critical filter had already begun to lower its guard. The transformation began the moment this practice left the closed circle and entered the marketplace. Publishers recognized the sales potential, alternative therapists saw an opportunity for consulting, and each new intermediary who picked up the original knowledge added a layer of simplification to make it more palatable, quicker to explain, easier to package into a one-hour talk. The problem is that simplification in this process almost always means cuts. And what was cut first, systematically, in nearly every commercial version that circulated over the past few decades, was precisely the detail of the timing. What remained was the general concept. Repeat a positive phrase, believe in it, feel as though it is already true. It was beautiful, it was marketable, it was easy to summarize in a punchy line for a book cover. But the heart of the method, the exact moment, the specific mental state, the unbroken sequence of 7 nights, was treated as a dispensable detail, an ornament that could be left aside without any damage to the final result. And it was exactly that discarding which transformed a historically effective practice into a generic formula that works for very few people, most of the time by accident, with no one understanding why. Those who studied these traditions more deeply, comparing records from completely different regions of the world, noticed something that hits hard for anyone who stops to consider it. In virtually every ancient account of repeated intention, the common element was not the content of the phrase itself, but the moment in which it was spoken and the tone in which it was delivered, always as ownership, never as a request. The language changed, the tradition changed, the cultural context changed entirely. But the timing and the tone of someone who already has, not someone who is still waiting, remain the same at every point on the map. This raises a question that few people stop to consider. If timing and the tone of ownership were always the central elements in virtually every tradition that preserved this practice, why were those exact two details the first to disappear in the most popular versions of recent years? The answer has less to do with bad faith on the part of those who commercialize the knowledge and more to do with something far simpler. Those two elements require discipline, presence, and a deeper understanding of what actually happens inside the mind during that specific window of the night. And that does not fit in a thumbnail, does not fit in a book cover slogan, does not fit in a promise of instant results with zero effort. A brief interval, measured in seconds, separates the state of being fully awake from the state of already being asleep. This interval has a technical name in some fields that study how the brain functions, but for those who preserved this knowledge within ancient traditions, it was always treated in a simpler and more direct way, the threshold. It is not sleep yet, not wakefulness anymore. It is a mental no man's land, where the mechanisms of defense, judgment, and skepticism that run at full capacity all day long begin to loosen their grip, piece by piece, until they stop functioning almost entirely. It is precisely in that interval, and no other moment of the day, that declaring ownership over something ceases to be mere words and begins to operate as a direct instruction. During the day, any affirmation passes first through the rational filter, through comparison with lived reality, through the automatic judgment of, is this true or isn't it? At the threshold, that verification process simply does not occur with the same intensity. The mind stops arguing with whoever is speaking, because the part responsible for the argument is already, in that moment, partially shut down, yielding space for an older and more receptive part to take control. Traditions that preserved this knowledge across generations always handled this detail with extreme care. It was not taught openly, not explained in accessible language to anyone who asked. Those who came close to this knowledge first had to prove sufficient discipline to repeat the practice without skipping a night, without distraction, without rushing for quick results. Only after demonstrating that commitment did they receive the full explanation of why the timing mattered as much as it did, and why declaring something as already yours in that specific interval produced an effect that the same phrase spoken at any other time of day could never achieve. And it is precisely there that the most important counterpoint of this entire discussion lives. Most modern versions, sold in courses or in colorful book covers, treat the timing as an optional recommendation. If possible, repeat before going to sleep, as though it were merely a comfort suggestion, and not the structural condition for the mechanism to work at all. Treating the timing as optional is like treating the right key as optional for opening a specific lock. You might try with a similar-looking key, but the door simply will not give, no matter how much force you apply. The explanation behind this phenomenon requires no complicated mystical beliefs to make sense. It is enough to understand that the human mind operates in different states throughout the day, and that each state has a different permeability to whatever is said, heard, or repeated. In the state of full alert, permeability is low, nearly non-existent for anything that sounds contradictory to present reality. At the threshold between wakefulness and sleep, that permeability increases significantly, opening space for the declaration of ownership made there to stop being an abstract wish and begin operating as a concrete instruction, one capable of reorganizing perception, behavior, and choice in the days that follow. This understanding alone dismantles a large part of the reason why so many people gave up on the practice after a few frustrated attempts in the morning. But the right timing, on its own, is still no guarantee of any result. Even within the threshold, with the door open and the mind receptive, there is a specific structure that the declaration must follow in order to pass through that interval without resistance. And it is precisely that structure, ignored by almost every commercial version in circulation today, that separates those who repeat without any effect from those who repeat and feel their life shift direction in less than a week. The first night changes nothing visible. Those who expect an immediate result, some clear sensation of a turning point, tend to quit early, concluding the practice did not work. But the first night was never designed to produce a noticeable effect. It serves only to plant, to open a path within terrain still hardened by years of mental repetition, running contrary to what is being declared there at the threshold, seconds before sleep takes over completely. Saying, "The new job is already mine" for the first time in that state is like making the first cut into compacted soil. The real work begins right there, but the result is still beneath the surface. The second and third nights follow the same pattern of apparent nothingness. On the outside, life continues exactly the same bills, the same conflicts, the same doubts that circled before the practice began. On the inside, however, something is already in motion, even without any external sign confirming it. The declaration repeated at the threshold does not act on the world directly. It acts first on the perception of the one who declares, and a changed perception begins to filter reality in a different way, noticing openings that were always there but were never seen, because the mind was programmed to see obstacles where there were actually pathways. The shift begins to surface around the fourth night, and generally in a way no one expected. Old patterns that seemed fixed and impossible to change begin to crack without any apparent reason. A decision that had been stuck for months suddenly becomes clear. A conversation that had been put off out of fear happens without any effort. A situation that seemed like a dead end reveals an unexpected opening coming from a direction the person had not even considered as a possibility. None of this tends to be interpreted at first as connected to the practice. It just feels like a coincidence, a lucky break, an isolated fluke. And it is exactly that mistaken interpretation that causes many people to stop precisely when the process was picking up speed. It is only by looking back, after the seventh night is complete, that the sequence of coincidences stops appearing random and begins to reveal what it always was, the direct consequence of a declaration repeated with discipline at the right time with the right structure for 7 uninterrupted nights. By the seventh night, the effect has already ceased to be subtle. It is no longer a matter of interpreting an ambiguous sign. The change becomes evident enough for anyone around to notice, even without knowing what has been happening behind the scenes. And here lies the point that separates those who truly lived the transformation from those who only engage with it in theory. Most people interrupt the practice before the seventh night, at exactly the moment when the underground process was about to surface completely. They stop on the third night because they didn't feel anything. They stop on the fifth because they decided it wasn't going to work. And they lose, precisely because of impatience, the chance to see what had been quietly being built since the very first declaration. 7 nights is the interval that traditions fixed, not as a decorative symbolic number, but as the minimum time necessary for the instruction, repeated at the threshold, to break through accumulated resistance and begin reorganizing the perceived reality of those who practice it. Those who sustain the complete sequence, without skipping a single night, without changing the structure of the phrase midway, without missing the right timing even once, tend to describe the seventh night as a watershed moment within their own routine. Not because something magical happened out of nowhere, but because 7 days of disciplined declaration in the right structure at the right moment are enough to reorganize perception, behavior, and choice in a way that no attempt made in the morning, in the middle of the day's chaos, ever managed to achieve. The goal declared every night as already yours begins, from that point on, to behave exactly as it was instructed to behave, not as a distant wish, but as something that already belongs to whoever had the discipline to repeat it all the way to the end. Tonight, seconds before you fall asleep, you have the choice to test this for yourself. Not to prove anything to anyone, and not to validate what was said here, just for yourself, in silence, to observe what begins to shift starting on the fourth night, and what becomes undeniable by the seventh. Tell me in the comments, what phrase, in the present tense, with a tone of already having it, short enough to pass through the threshold without effort, would you choose to repeat for the next 7 nights? I want to read yours, and if this knowledge resonated with you, if it recovered something that seemed lost among so many hollowed-out versions out there, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Because traditions like this one, preserved across generations before they were ever turned into a product, keep showing up here, one by one, for those who truly want to go beyond the surface of what gets sold as spirituality. The seventh night is 7 days away. The only question that matters right now is, will you hold on until then, or will you stop at exactly the point where everything was about to reveal itself?